Hello everyone, David here. It is October, which means that it's Halloween time. But along with Halloween comes The Walking Dead. And Season 4 is upon us, so I'm here to review the first episode for Season 4, 30 Days Without an Accident. Now obviously this goes without saying, but spoiler alert, so if you have not been watching the TV show, I don't know what is up with you. But this video will have spoilers for this episode as well as the previous season, so you've been warned. So the episode starts off with Rick coming out of the prison. He's washing his face in classic Rick style. Oh. And we get our first taste of how civilized the prison has become ever since the whole thing with the governor happened in the final episode of Season 3, and how much this community has thrived. I mean, Rick goes over to what is now a garden and starts to use a hoe to plow down the plants and stuff, and doing some basic gardening. And upon gardening, he finds a gun, and he looks at the walkers, and you can tell that he thinks about shooting at least one, but he doesn't do it. My first assumption is that he doesn't want to waste bullets, and that means that the situation with the walkers is getting worse. They're starting to tear down the gates, like we saw being foreshadowed in the trailers, that the prison's just not going to hold very long, and eventually the walkers are going to be able to tear down the fences. So my assumption was that he wanted to conserve ammunition. But as the episode goes on, it is revealed that Rick is suffering from, I guess, some form of PTSD, and because of that, he can't shoot a gun. He's fine with a knife, but he can't shoot a gun. I don't have PTSD, so I'm probably just talking out of my ass, but I don't see how it's any different killing a walker with a knife than killing them with a gun. I mean, I guess this is more of a personal thing with Rick of using guns, but to me, that felt a little weird. And on top of that, they're using a device that I've seen before in other movies and TV shows. The guy who, after a traumatic experience, cannot use a gun, and eventually you can kind of tell that he's gonna have to use a gun eventually. But that little moral dilemma that Rick has with himself about not being able to use a gun, I think we could do without that. I really hope that in the next episode he starts using a gun, because I do not want to carry this thing for the entire first half of the season. Oh, I can't use a gun. No, I can only use knives. I can't use a gun. I can't use a gun. No. Please get rid of this thing as soon as possible, preferably in the next episode. What I did love is the entire first 10 minutes of this episode, because lo and behold, people are happy. One of the things that I've kept mentioning about what I started to dislike about the Walking Dead TV show is that everybody's just an asshole to each other. I mean, they don't even get to know each other before they start turning their guns and knives at each other. Here, they have developed such a civilized community within the prison that everybody is literally all smiles. It was so refreshing to see Michonne, Daryl, Rick himself, Carl, everybody just smiling at each other, making jokes, having, I don't want to say a good time, but really, looking at the positive side of things despite of how shitty the world has become. And I was really digging it, and it was actually making me like an awful lot more characters than I had in the previous season, because in the first season, I mean, we were very mixed on how we felt about Rick, about his psychosis and what he was going through. Here, he is instantly very likable. He's having a nice little banter to his son, while at the same time disciplining him in the proper way. And the conversations that he had with any other character that he interacts in this episode is just done very well. But of course, this is The Walking Dead. We just can't have that. So the group sets out to look for food and supplies. Rick decides to go into the woods to hunt down little animals or just scavenge whatever he can find, while who was in the group? Tyrese, Sasha, oh my goodness. Okay, let me go ahead and clarify this. This whole time, and I don't know if maybe I just simply forgot that there were details in Season 3 that pointed out to this, but apparently they went over my head. But for the longest time, I thought Sasha and Tyrese were boyfriend and girlfriend. But it turns out that they're brother and sister, because of that line where Sasha says, "You had a few years before I was born when I wasn't the boss of you." So I was like, oh, some Luke and Leia shit. This whole time I thought they were together, but then when I saw Tyrese, getting his, getting it on, well, not exactly getting it on, but being a little Mac Daddy on Karen, the survivor from the slaughter that the governor unleashed upon his community of Woodbury at the end of the season 3 finale. That made me go like, well, what happened to Sasha? Turns out they're brother and sister, so that was awkward. But Tyrese, Sasha, Glenn, Daryl, and a newcomer to the group, I believe his name was Zach, who happens to be Beth's boyfriend. Apparently, Beth is also. See, that's the thing that I loved about the first 10 minutes, is that besides making what were starting to appear as unlikable characters likable again, and making it feel very refreshing by having everybody smile and laugh and greet each other like regular people would, it also managed to go ahead and show you how it has been in the in the past. I'm assuming it's been like a few months at least since the events of the season 3 finale. So I love the way that they depicted how things have changed. Beth got a boyfriend, Tyrese and Karen are together, and everybody's just getting along. You get the introduction of new characters, and you see how they interact, and I was just digging it the entire time. But they did it without having to shove so many things and say, this is what happened, this is what happened. No, there are some things that I can tell are going to be saved for future episodes, and in those episodes that will show, okay, you remember this other character? Okay, this is what happened since the season 3 finale. So I'm hoping they do that. So they only showed the bare essentials of what has happened in the past few months since the events of the season 3 finale. But anyways, Glenn, Daryl, Beth's boyfriend Zach, Tyrese, and Sasha, and Michonne set out to a supermarket, and basically they're just going to do a basic run. Go in, find all the food and supplies, get out, return to the prison. All's good. Or is it? Of course, things have to go wrong, walkers become involved, and we lose one of our characters. And I'm somewhat on the more favorable side of killing off this character. The character that has to go in this first episode for season 4 is none other than Beth's boyfriend, Zach. And I like it for a number of things. One, it shows us that anybody's up for grabs, because when we first see Zach, I don't know, I'll admit, he looked like a red shirt. He looked like a red shirt. I'm like, I don't think we're really gonna, get to know this guy at all. So chances are he's gonna go either in this episode or the next episode. Who knows? And that will make me feel bad for Beth no matter what. But then you have that scene with him talking to Daryl and him trying to guess what Daryl was doing before the outbreak. And that scene, with the inclusion of Michonne's laugh, that scene alone made me like that character so much. Zach was so likable. The dialogue between the two of them was very likable and very charismatic, and I dug him. But that made me think even more that he was gonna die, because I'm like, man, this character is awesome, and it's gonna suck when he dies. However, I did not foresee him dying in this episode, let alone in that few minutes later in that scene where all the walkers are flying in from the ceiling, which I gotta admit was probably one of the most suspenseful scenes that I've seen in The Walking Dead. Having all those walkers just fall from the ceiling, especially when you see that shot of the amount of walkers that were on the roof with that helicopter. One of the more tense scenes and the more suspenseful scenes that I've seen in The Walking Dead show. But him dying right on the spot let me know that, okay, characters that we're probably going to end up liking even more or get introduced to and like later on in the season, anybody can go. Second thing is that he may have started a somewhat psychological arc for Beth. It seems like, and it seems like, it doesn't mean that they're actually going to go through with this, but so far it looks like maybe they could take somewhat of a story arc with Beth and explore how her mind works, because immediately when she gets told that her boyfriend got killed, she is completely unfazed by it. She says, I'm not going to cry, and she literally goes to a board and takes off the 3 off, this is where the title comes from. It's a accident count board, like in factories where it says, so and so days have gone by without an accident. It said 30, and she takes off the 3, and now it says 0. Basically, the accident represents whenever the community within the prison loses somebody, and she takes off the 3, symbolizing that here, she's starting over the clock there. But while doing it, she's completely unfazed by the death of her boyfriend. So I think that that's a good opportunity for the writers to go ahead and bring forward a nice little psychological story arc and decent little subplot for Beth. My only problem would have to be that even though it might have already happened, the walkers falling through the ceiling in the supermarket, that was probably eventually going to happen some way or another, just to a lesser extent because of the fact that the ceiling and the roof was pretty weak. I mean, you saw the walkers walking over the ceiling, and that's all starting to press in, and you can tell that thing's gonna fall apart. But what I didn't like is that the entire thing could have been avoided if it wasn't for this guy, Bob Stuckey, a character I believe is from the comics and is being brought into the show in season 4. And so far, not digging this character. I don't hate him. It's just that he's that character that tags along, says, "Hey, I can help," but then he just fucks things up because of his rehabilitation as a former alcoholic. Because you can easily tell that he's a former alcoholic when he passes by the wine and that look on his face. I'm like, you used to be an alcoholic. The whole thing could have been avoided if he wasn't tempted to take a drink, but instead, I mean, I commend him for resisting and putting the thing back, but if you didn't even go over there in the first place, you wouldn't have attracted those walkers to the focal point of the roof, through the noise that you created with the shelf of wines falling down, and the whole thing could have been avoided, and Zach, the cool dude, could have lived. I'm not a huge fan of characters that are, the innocent type, but if they had just kept themselves from doing something, they could have avoided this entire mess. And I understand that, a show like The Walking Dead requires action and some really good zombie kills, which I will say are some pretty good ones here. Not only zombie kills in, when it comes to somebody, an actual living character killing another zombie, because there's a shot where Daryl, of course it had to be Daryl shoots from the hip with his crossbow to a zombie and nails him in the head. I'm like, that was awesome. I liked it better that he didn't even aim. He just went whoosh. But some zombies just kill themselves on their own by falling through the ceilings. They would just go splat. Literally splat. Just blood and guts and everything just going all over the floor. And they were done awesome. And of course, what could you expect from the episode that is directed by Greg Nicotero, who is the special effects and makeup artist for the entire show. While all of this is going on in the supermarket, Rick is out in the forest and he encounters a woman who closely resembles Uma Thurman. I mean, she looked straight out like a homeless Uma Thurman. But this lady is very creepy, and at first you thought she was a walker, but then she starts speaking. He's like, what the hell? And I love this little subplot with Rick because, like, he even said I think he says to Herschel later on towards the end of the episode, that could have been me. That could have been me. I'm glad that I was shown what I could have become if I hadn't stopped. So I really dug that little parallel. And, it was a nice little, not only it was a way for Rick to reflect on what he could have been, but also it was a nice little recap of Rick's psychosis and his story arc throughout season 3. And before the episode ends, basically we just get a little glimpse of how characters have been affected by the events that transpired throughout this entire first episode. I mean, Tyrese says that after what happened in the supermarket, he doesn't know if he has what it takes to even be in this world and be able to kill walkers, whether it be, like he says, just quick and without thinking about it out there in the field, or killing them by the fence where he's face to face with them. And also, the whole deal with Glenn and Maggie and, what their little relationship could lead to. And again, like I said before, Beth's potential psychological story arc that could be explored more in later episodes after finding out that her boyfriend died without being faced by it at all. Rick, like I said, reflecting on what he could have become. And Carl, who I was scared would become the next Andrea towards the end of season 3. And when I say Andrea, I don't mean the exact same type of character, but just that character that we could have liked, but now we're starting to hate, and we're just gonna start wishing that this person would just die. In this episode, much like with the other characters in that first 10 minutes, he was very likable. He was reading comic books, he was getting along with Michonne, even though he was just a little rebellious towards Rick, his father. He was doing it in a natural kid, the way that a kid would do. So I was like, okay, here's Coral being back to just being a regular kid, and it looks like they have been able to move past what Carl did at the end of season 3 by, completely gunning down that one guy. I just didn't like the fact that he had another little whiny moment at the very end of the episode when it's revealed that Carol has been teaching kids how to use knives instead of actually telling them stories. Which is weird because I was totally expecting Carl to be like, hell yeah, we're gonna learn how to use knives. Yeah, this is my sort of shtick. I mean, based on how he was talking to the other kids later on when they were naming the walkers, which I really dug because it was once again a nice little parallel. Much like Rick had his own little parallel, little subplot. Carl had his own where he was telling others to not name walkers while he was being told not to name animals because eventually they're going to become food. But I didn't like that. Instead of being cool with it, he did the thing that he always does when he sees or hears something that he's just not cool with. Really hope we don't see any more of that in the later episodes for this season. And if the episode had ended this way, I would have said it was a pretty decent start to the new season, but there was nothing that that will keep us talking about it, that will make us look forward to the next episode. But of course they couldn't do without that. At the end of the episode, a character that had a reoccurring role through this episode, and of course through this episode only, shows signs of being a bit ill. Earlier he said that he felt like throwing up when he was at the story time, so he was excused. But right off the bat, they showed that this guy definitely has a serious illness. He goes to the bathrooms to shower off, maybe cool off, but it is too late. He passes out, and lo and behold, when we pan out over to his face, his eyes open, he is now a walker. So this thing is, of course, the talk of the town when it comes to the episode, to the first episode of season 4. What does this mean? Because throughout the entire episode, we were not shown him getting bitten by any walker whatsoever. Now, granted, it is something that maybe could be pulled out in the next episode or the third episode that, maybe he was bitten. But so far, we are led to believe that he has not been bitten whatsoever. So what does this mean? I mean, this was foreshadowed not only in the trailers, but also by the producers, like at Comic-Con, they were saying that there's a new threat, besides the governor, besides the walkers, there's a new threat that the people of the prison are going to have to face. And they were saying about how it's something that they just can't kill easily, something that, can move very quickly and be invisible. I can't remember they mentioned this being invisible, but I remember those first two things, that's what the producer said. And so far it does seem like that new threat is disease. I think it's disease, and I think that the virus has manifested itself to where it can infect you, and it'll obviously have the same effects as a regular bite, in which you get fever, just all around. It looks like you just got infected by the plague, you die, and then you come back. But now, without the activation of a bite, or without actually getting killed while still keeping the brain intact, it looks like the people of the prison have something else to worry about. I read something on Twitter that apparently the trailers hint at there being infected water running through the prison, and that's how he got sick, which is one of the reasons why I don't watch the trailers. Thank you to the person who posted it on Twitter. Thanks a lot. But even with that said, and even with that being hinted at in the trailers, I think it's left open to interpretation so far with this first episode as to how did this guy manage to get sick, die, and turn into a walker without getting bit. I mean, because we know that you can come back no matter what, as long as the brain is still intact, no matter how you die. But is the virus mutating to where now it's accessible through water, through food, through even animals? Or could it be that this guy got infected by just a regular disease, not even the actual main zombie virus, and he just got sick, died in the bathroom, and now this guy is going to be roaming the halls and infecting people while, other people, since the community has become so big, people are not going to notice until it's too late. Much like how the world didn't notice that there was an outbreak until it was too late. So far, the first episode of Season 4 is off to a really good start. I mean, I'm digging it. I love that they were able to correct some things from Season 3 while at the same time not tackling everything, not trying to tie in every single loose end from Season 3. Just give you the bare essentials to start off, and then as the season goes on, then they're going to start tackling those things while still delivering all the things that we love about The Walking Dead. Daryl being badass, Michonne being badass, Rick being a supportive and dependable leader and smiling once again, and some all-around great zombie action. If I had to think of anything that I didn't like about this episode, or I was just very unsure about, it would be these two things. One, not a fan of how this first episode is shipping Carol and Daryl. So far, the scenes that have the two of them together and talking to one another almost feel like the show is kind of gearing towards having them be an item, and I, for one, do not want to see that. It's just kind of gross. I mean, I've always saw them as brother and sister, only with the ability to make jokes towards one another that a brother and sister wouldn't do because they're related. You know what I mean? But aside from that, they have a very firm brother and sister kind of relationship. I mean, I just don't see them together. And if, in case you guys don't know, shipping is where people root for two characters that are very unlikely to get together to actually get together. I mean, if anything, Daryl and Michonne. Can you imagine how badass those babies would be? And the other thing that I don't know how to feel about is the reference to Macon. At the beginning of the episode, Michonne says that after she's done helping out the group at the prison, she's thinking about taking a trip to Macon and seeing what she could find there. And then at the end of the episode, you see her pull out a map and use her finger to follow a trail, the best, quickest, and hopefully safest route to Macon from the prison. And if you guys couldn't already tell, Macon is the hometown for the protagonist of the Walking Dead Telltale video game, Lee Everett. And when she said that at the beginning of the episode, when she said that for the very first time, saying that, I was thinking about going to Macon, I thought, okay, that's a nice little reference to the Walking Dead video game. But the fact that the writers went ahead and brought back that reference at the end of the episode, having her pull out that map and say, okay, it's from here to here, that makes me go, okay, are the writers seriously, and the writers and the producers, are they seriously going to go ahead and cross this show over with the Walking Dead Telltale video game? I mean, people are going to freak out no matter what if this comes to fruition. Whether it be freaking out because this is an injustice to the video game, or freaking out because this is just plain old awesome. I'm leaning more on the this might be a bad idea side. Mainly because, and spoilers for the Walking Dead Telltale game if you have not played it, so fair warning, but in Season 1, one can say that Lee Everett's story has been wrapped up. There's no way that his story can continue. So to have him come back and, in the form of a cameo, or have Clementine come back in the form of a cameo, let alone a full supporting role in the show, it would just feel very unnatural and out of place to have that. I mean, I'd rather have both universes separate, despite the fact that at the beginning of the first of Season 1 of The Walking Dead game, there were some references to characters from the comic, but they were treated more so in the form of how they were in the comic, more so than in the TV show, which is one of the things that I liked about the game. My opinion, keep the two separate. I give 30 Days Without an Accident an 8.8 out of 10, which is a B+. I do kind of wish that maybe Rick would have shaved his beard off to symbolize that he has seen what he could have become, and now, through the symbolism of having a completely shaved and clear face, he is now a new man. But maybe in the next episode, who knows. I'll be back next week with my review of episode 2 of Season 4 of The Walking Dead, and until next time, guys, see you later.